I woke up before dawn, as I always did. The house was quiet, too quiet. The kind of quiet that presses against your ears, making you hyper-aware of every creak and rustle. I turned over in bed, half expecting to feel Sarah beside me, her warmth a familiar comfort. But all I found was cold sheets, untouched and unwelcoming. She hadn't slept next to me for weeks. At first, she made excuses: too warm, too restless, needed space. But now, she didn't even bother explaining. She just disappeared into the guest room, leaving me alone with my thoughts and the suffocating silence. I sat up, rubbing my face, staring at the empty side of the bed. My wedding ring felt heavier than usual, as if my body already knew something my mind refused to accept. Downstairs, I made coffee. The smell filled the kitchen, wrapping around me like an old memory. Sarah used to love waking up to fresh coffee. Now she barely touched it. I heard the shuffle of feet behind me, and for a brief moment my heart lifted. Maybe today would be different. Maybe she'd say good morning. Maybe she'd smile. But she didn't. She walked past me like I was furniture, her eyes glued to her phone. I watched her open the fridge, grab a bottle of water, and check her notifications. Her fingers moved fast, scrolling, typing, fully engaged with someone, just not me. Sarah, I tried again, my voice careful, testing the waters. She sighed, not even looking up. I have to get ready. That was it. No eye contact, no warmth, no kiss on the cheek like she used to do without thinking. I let out a slow breath. It was like I had become a ghost in my own home. And the worst part? I had no idea why. The days blurred together, each one a carbon copy of the last. Sarah's absence became a constant presence, a shadow that followed me everywhere. I replayed the past few months in my head, searching for the moment things shifted. But there wasn't one, no big fight, no dramatic moment, just a slow, steady erosion of everything we had built. One evening I came home early from work. Sarah's car wasn't in the driveway, but that wasn't unusual. She had been coming home later and later, always with the same excuse: meetings, deadlines, work. I walked into the house, dropping my keys onto the table, and for the first time, I really looked around. The house was eerily neat, almost staged. There were no traces of us anymore. The photos on the wall were the same, but they felt like relics from another life. The kitchen counter, once cluttered with our daily chaos, was spotless. No signs of her morning coffee mug, no traces of the hurried breakfasts we used to share. It was like Sarah had already checked out. I went upstairs, standing in the doorway of our bedroom. My stomach twisted as I glanced at the neatly made bed, at the vanity where her perfumes used to sit, now reduced to just one bottle, the rest missing. I felt my pulse quicken. I went to the closet. At first, I didn't notice anything wrong. But then, as I looked closer, I realized there were gaps. Sarah's side wasn't empty, but it was lighter. The hangers weren't as full as they used to be. Some of her favorite dresses were gone. A few pairs of shoes missing. I crouched down and pulled open the bottom drawer, where she kept her smaller travel bags. It was empty. My breath came out slow and controlled, but inside, my heart was hammering. She was leaving, or worse, she had already left in every way that mattered. That night, I lay in bed alone again, staring at the ceiling. The weight on my chest grew heavier. I couldn't keep pretending this was normal. Somewhere deep inside, a small voice whispered, "What if this is the end?" I used to believe that love had a sound, the warmth in Sarah's voice when she'd say my name, the soft laughter we used to share over inside jokes no one else would understand, the way she used to hum along to the radio while cooking dinner. Now, love had become silence. The next morning I found it, a small envelope tucked away in her dresser drawer. My name was written on the front in her neat handwriting. My stomach clenched as I pulled it out, my fingers numb. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded neatly. I opened it, my hands trembling. John. I don't know how to say this, so I'll keep it simple. I need space. Please don't make this harder than it already is. Sarah. I read it 3 times, waiting for some hidden meaning to reveal itself. But there was nothing, no emotion, no regret, just a cold, impersonal request for me to disappear from her life quietly. I drove aimlessly that night, my thoughts a chaotic blur. Eventually, I found myself parked outside a small diner Sarah and I used to visit when we were first married. I had no idea why I ended up there, but I got out anyway, stepping inside. The place looked exactly the same: dim lighting, cracked leather booths, the smell of coffee and fried food hanging in the air. I slid into a booth near the window, ordering a black coffee from the waitress without even thinking about it. My hands were still shaking slightly as I placed Sarah's note on the table in front of me, smoothing it out. I stared at it for a long time, waiting for something: anger, heartbreak, relief. But more than anything, I just felt tired. "Rough night?" The voice came from across the table. I looked up, startled, to see a woman standing there, holding a coffee cup in one hand. She was about my age, with dark hair pulled into a loose ponytail and a simple sweater. "Do I know you?" I asked, frowning slightly. She gave me a small, apologetic smile. "Sorry. That was probably weird. I noticed you've been staring at that piece of paper for 10 minutes, like it's going to change if you look at it long enough." I let out a slow breath, glancing back down at Sarah's note. "Yeah. Something like that." Emily slid into the booth across from me, setting her coffee down. She studied me for a moment, her eyes soft but probing. "Want to talk about it?" she asked, her voice gentle. I hesitated. Talking to a stranger about my crumbling marriage felt strange, but at the same time, I was desperate for someone to listen. "It's my wife," I began, my voice low. "She's leaving. Or maybe she's already left. I don't even know anymore." Emily nodded, her expression thoughtful. "That's tough. How long has it been like this?" "Months," I admitted, running a hand through my hair. "At first I thought it was just stress, work, life, you know. But then she stopped talking to me, stopped looking at me. It's like I'm invisible in my own home." Emily listened quietly, her hands wrapped around her coffee cup. She didn't interrupt, didn't offer empty platitudes. She just let me talk, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like someone actually saw me. "Do you think there's someone else?" she asked finally, her tone careful. I shook my head. "I don't know. Maybe. But it's not even about that anymore. It's like she's already gone, and I'm just waiting for the final blow." Emily sighed, leaning back in her seat. "Some people don't leave with a bang, you know? They just fade away, piece by piece, until there's nothing left." Her words hit me hard. That's exactly what Sarah had been doing, fading away, leaving me behind without even realizing it. I drove home that night with Emily's words echoing in my mind. The house was dark when I arrived, but Sarah's car was in the driveway. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. She was in the bedroom, packing a suitcase. The sight of it made my stomach twist. "So this is it?" I asked, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. Sarah froze for a moment, then turned to face me. Her expression was unreadable. No sadness, no regret, just a cold detachment that made my heart ache. "I was going to tell you," she said quietly. "When?" I shot back, my voice rising. "After you were already gone?" She didn't answer. Instead, she turned back to the suitcase, folding clothes with mechanical precision. "I didn't want a big fight," she said finally. I didn't want to drag this out." "Drag this out?" I repeated, my voice bitter. "Like our marriage was just an inconvenience you're trying to get rid of." Sarah sighed, running a hand through her hair. "John, it's not that simple. We've been drifting apart for a long time. You know that." "Do I?" I asked, my voice breaking. "Because I've been trying to fix this, trying to understand what went wrong. But you just checked out." She looked away, her jaw tightening. "I'm sorry," she said finally, though her tone lacked any real emotion. But this is what's best for both of us. I stared at her, my heart pounding in my chest. For the first time, I realized that the woman standing in front of me wasn't the Sarah I had married. She was a stranger, someone I no longer recognized. Fine, I said quietly, my voice trembling. If this is what you want, then go. But don't expect me to just sit here and pretend everything's okay. Sarah nodded, her expression unreadable. She zipped up the suitcase and turned to leave, pausing at the door. Take care of yourself, John, she said softly, before walking out of the room. I stood there for a long time, staring at the empty doorway. The weight of her absence pressed down on me, but for the first time, I felt a strange sense of relief. It was over. The days that followed were a blur. Sarah moved out, leaving behind only a few traces of her presence. The house felt emptier than ever, but at the same time, it also felt lighter, as if a heavy burden had been lifted. I found myself returning to the diner more often, drawn by the comfort of Emily's company. She had become a constant in my life, a source of support and understanding that I hadn't realized I needed. One evening, as we sat in our usual booth, Emily looked at me with a small smile. How are you holding up? I shrugged, stirring my coffee absently. I'm okay, I think. It's strange, you know? Being alone after so long. But it's also kind of freeing. Emily nodded, her expression thoughtful. Sometimes you need to lose something to find yourself again. Her words resonated with me. For so long, I had defined myself by my marriage, by my relationship with Sarah. But now, I was starting to see that there was more to me than just that. What about you? I asked, curious. How did you move on after your divorce? Emily smiled, a hint of sadness in her eyes. It wasn't easy. But I realized that I couldn't keep living in the past. I had to start over, to find new things that made me happy. Like what? She laughed softly. Like this diner. Like meeting new people. Like realizing that life doesn't end just because one chapter does. I smiled, feeling a sense of hope that I hadn't felt in a long time. Maybe, just maybe, this wasn't the end. Maybe it was the beginning of something new. As the weeks turned into months, I began to rebuild my life. I started painting again, something I hadn't done in years. I reconnected with old friends, explored new hobbies, and even took a solo trip to the coast. Emily and I grew closer, our friendship blossoming into something deeper. She was there for me in ways that Sarah never had been, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was truly living. One evening, as we sat on the beach watching the sunset, Emily turned to me with a smile. You've come a long way, John. I nodded, feeling a sense of peace that I hadn't felt in years. Yeah, I think I have. She reached over, taking my hand in hers. I'm proud of you. I smiled, squeezing her hand. I couldn't have done it without you. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I realized that this was just the beginning. The pain of the past was still there, but it no longer defined me. I was ready to move forward, to embrace whatever came next.